Welcome all junior employees, assistant to the detectives, and assistant detectives to the overviews of the Anti-Strangling Task Force. This is the overview for the Hay Place Bounty Hunters. The reason I've made this particular team or individual task force is because this is actually a very important job, because there are a number of things which are referenced or just placed in the background which, have additional meaning or influence on the narrative. A big part of this team's responsibility isn't just going to be to find similar moments, but it's also going to be to explain them and to fit that puzzle piece in the greater picture. Now, at the end of this overview, I'm going to give one example of a particular find that I don't think gets enough attention. Right, but the first batch are going to be things that we already sort of know. So to get straight into it, an example of what the Hay Place Bounty Hunters are going to be looking for is the sex toy next to Michael's Foreman grill in their bedroom at the dinner party that we assume is Jan's, right? But we have the Foreman grill sitting in the background, and on the table behind it, there seems to be a sex toy as well. Now, if we sort of relate that to how, Michael likes to wake up to the smell of bacon every morning, could we possibly draw the conclusion that Jan perhaps likes to wake up to the sound of a vibrator, for example? For special finds and for unique finds, Hay Place Bounty Hunters are going to be awarded with a big surprise. However, what I'm really looking for this task force to do is to try and explain it and to try and connect it to other episodes. I mean, Jan's quite a sexual being.
I orgasm fairly easily. Michael was kind of like my dirty secret, having sex with him. I don't know, I was just turned on by my own degradation.
As we get into the investigation, that'll be revealed more and more to us, right? But how that fits into the greater picture, because obviously sex, as I've mentioned a number of times now, has a very central role to the theme of this mystery. So finding something like that in the background has, further implications. Thus far, I'd say a lot of fans have just looked at it as a funny curiosity. But if you've come this far in the Anti-Strangling Task Force, you'll probably start to realize that these sort of moments or these sort of prop placings actually have greater weighting and I would say have a greater role in the story. So there's one example. We've got the sex toy on the table in Dinner Party. In the episode St. Patrick's Day, and I never noticed this. I got this from one of the lists online. They actually color the water green in the water cooler. Obviously someone's put some food coloring in there and turned the water green, or perhaps it's lime cordial, who knows. Again, at face value, this is just a fun curiosity and getting into the spirit of St. Patrick's Day. But as I've mentioned in my Season 1 overview on YouTube, there's more to the water coolers, and I even posit the possibility that, Dwight is perhaps poisoning the water supply in the office. So all of a sudden, we leave that sort of perspective that coloring the water green is just a fun curiosity, and it actually has greater implications in the way of, the motif of poisoning and perhaps, as Dwight brings his own water to work, right? There's further implications there. That would be something for the Hay Place to look into and try and see if there's anything additional in that episode or throughout the series that might be a call back to that. There's that episode in drug testing where Dwight tells the drug testing lady that his urine was green.
You might remember testing my urine a few years back when I was applying to be a volunteer sheriff's deputy.
We test a lot of urine.
Mine was green.
Right, now, there are implications there with various psychotic medications and stuff like that, but even that green water in the water bottle links back to that part of the mystery. And I know I may be touching on a few things that we haven't covered yet. The point I'm trying to get across here, guys, is a simple curiosity, or what appears to be a simple curiosity at face value, actually has deeper implications. In the episode Lecture Circuit, when Pam goes back to Karen's office because of the photocopier heist that they did in a previous episode, the photocopier is now chained to the room, and there's a sign that says, report all suspicious behavior around the photocopier to security. Now again, at face value, it's just a fun curiosity and a callback to the previous episode, but I've mentioned the photocopiers have implications in the way of time travel and this concept of replicants. So all of a sudden, having that photocopier chained up, right, and the fact that the photocopier has a symbolic meaning in the Scranton office, that sort of leads us to start questioning, well, is the same symbology applied in the other offices? If the photocopier, for example, is some sort of a time travel related device, well, what does it then mean that it's chained? The implication all of a sudden is greater. What we appeared at first value is just an interesting callback to a previous episode, actually has possible deeper implications. The Hay Place bounty hunters need to get deep into those implications. To come back to the dinner party episode, when Michael brings down Andy and Jim to pitch them investing $10,000 into Jan's candle business, there are various boxes in his garage, and the one that my eye has always been drawn to is the boxes that say office stuff. This is something that I think sort of flown under the radar for a lot of people, because I guess the assumption might be, well, of course, Michael's the manager, he's got office stuff in his garage, but that's not exactly how I would suggest seeing it. I mentioned earlier that Michael is aware that Dwight is a dangerous character. I believe that he's also aware of the financial fraud going on. So now all of a sudden these documents or boxes of documents have a different implication. Could it be that Michael has these documents as an insurance policy? Should an investigation start? Is it to cover himself in the event, things go downhill for the office? We know, for example, in Michael's last episode, he hands Andy a bunch of accounts which Michael managed. Now that's a massive clue in of itself, that Michael held certain clients away from the salespeople. Right, so if he's holding clients secretly or client files secretly, what are these files? What does it mean? What does it tell us about Michael and the position he's in? One that's been frequently referenced is when Jim has his little house party in season 2, there seems to be a little voodoo doll of Roy on his pinboard. And thus far, a lot of fans have just found it a curiosity. It's, obviously Jim's chasing after Pam, Pam's with Roy. But all of a sudden, when we start to think of motif in the show, we've got Voodoo Mama Juju in the episode Murder when they're playing that Savannah game, right? There's another voodoo doll that pops up. And I've already mentioned that we have links to the dark arts and occults. And in the Great Scott Film Forensics overview, I talk about how The Crow has important parallels to Dwight's story. So the fact that we have another voodoo doll, again, at face value seems like nothing, but there is a motif element there. And I've mentioned as well, one of the things that I'm going to ask Rogue Squadron to be looking at is whether the office is symbolic of a cult. Now, if we just assume for a moment that these things could be theories with credibility, all of a sudden Jim having a voodoo doll has implications. What is his role in this cult? Where is he in the hierarchy? Is he involved with some sort of black magic himself? Again, may sound silly, but we need to keep in mind that we have a motif here all of a sudden. Right, so what does that mean? What are the implications of that? A lot of these observances that fans have found seem like they have no relevance, but clearly the set and the producers and the creators and the directors have put effort into these sets. Right, so a minor detail like that could simply just be a fun little throwback. But if we look at the greater picture, it's not impossible that there are further implications to something like that. Another example where the Hay Place will spend probably more time focusing on a single frame is something like Dwight's organizational chart. In the episode Did I Stutter, Michael wants to sack Stanley, but he doesn't have the guts to do so, so he's trying to work out who else in the office has the power to fire Stanley. He asks Dwight if there's anybody in the hierarchy that can do this for him, because we already know by this stage, Michael hates that part of his job, right? And Dwight pulls out this organizational chart. And I'm only going to mention a few curiosities here, but this would be an example where I would, expect the Hay Place bounty hunters to actually spend a little bit more time on an image like this, because there's a lot of information in this image. One that's been mentioned previously is that Creed's name is in commas. It's in quotation marks. Right, and we already know Creed in a couple of episodes tells us that, he killed someone in prison by the name of Creed Bratton, and that he has various other aliases, right? So the fact Dwight knows that, and I've already mentioned in the Must Know episodes that Creed is Dwight's adopted father, right? But the fact that Dwight knows that adds to that picture of, perhaps there's a deeper or more unique relationship between Creed and Dwight. There's a Jewish symbol next to Toby's name, and as we already know, there's a strong Nazi influence on the story of Dwight's life, and the Nazis have a role to play there. So again, that sort of reinforces that theme. But I guess, what does that mean in the greater story? Assuming Dwight is a Nazi or is apologetic to Nazi ideology, right? Well, what does it mean to him if Toby is Jewish, right? Does that put, Toby's life in danger? Does that have something to do with the relationship with Toby and Dwight? Then we have the lines. We've got a whole bunch of lines that sort of, tell a story of the relationship between different people. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, guys, I haven't studied this image. Looking at those lines, do we have other episodes that reinforce perhaps those relationship lines Dwight has drawn? Are they just the relationships from Dwight's perspective, or are the creators telling us something more there? And I likely, lean to the latter in that case. It's reinforcing this concept of the mindset that the Hay Place bounty hunters have to sort of adopt. And the final one I want to mention, and look, there's a lot more in this image, right? But the final one I want to mention is in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a little sort of copyright caveat, which says, "Do not duplicate or transmit intellectual property of Dwight K. Schrute for 1,000 years." As I mentioned in the Great Scott Film Forensics, there's a strong link and strong parallels between the movie The Crow, where Eric Draven comes out of the grave, right, and sort of things that Dwight says about himself. No normal human being is able to live for 1,000 years, right? Yet Dwight is very conscious of the fact that he doesn't want this information copied or transmitted for 1,000 years. I've also mentioned that, Dwight is a time traveler. So does this document have implications if he chooses to travel, 1,000 years in the future? What does that mean? What are the implications of that? And there are many things that we could sort of hypothesize. So really, as I've mentioned, guys, at face value, this may seem like a simple task force. It's like, I found this thing. Here, guys, have a look at it. It's not the case. What you guys find has to be not only disseminated to the other relevant task forces. I'm really looking for discourse around here. I really want us to think a little bit deeper, and what could the implications of that be? Because, by now, surely everybody has realized this mystery is way more vast than first expected. Finding the Scranton Strangler was simple. They gave it to us in the first 20 seconds of the show. Explaining it is the challenge. In the episode The Alliance, Jim convinces Dwight to go down into the warehouse and to hide in a box. It's just one of Jim's pranks. There's a lot more going on in that episode. As he's taping Dwight up in the box, there seems to be a toy rat in the background to the right, and it seems to be either stuck under the trolley, it's moving its head up and down. Then we go to a talking head of Dwight, and then we come back to the taping of the box, and that rat is gone. Now, to me, out of all the lists that I see online of 20 things, 10 things you never noticed in the office, why this one doesn't make the cut, to me, is a little bit shocking. I mean, sure, I guess maybe people haven't put it in the list because they can't explain it. But to me, there's something very eerie about this, right? It's there in the first shot, then it's gone in the next. So purely, let's say if we want to touch on it from the time travel perspective, are there time travel implications? I'm not saying there are, but it's a question that has to be asked. What is the rat? Is it symbolic of something, right? That rat, to me, has my gut instinct, based on how I understand that the creators communicate to us through the various tools that, writers and directors and producers use. My gut feeling is there's something more to this rat, right? And the way that it's wriggling and then it disappears, the whole thing is just bizarre. And it's that bizarreness which I guess in my mind raises significant questions. Finding similar things like this rat, in my eyes, are going to be considered, premium submissions in my eyes for the big surprise at the end of the investigation. Because again, hopefully by now, your eyes should start to open in how the message is communicated to us, and it just stinks of a massive clue. Right? I have no idea what it means though, guys. But, this is like a prime example of why we have a Hay Place bounty hunter task force. The last thing, guys, and this is we're reaching the conclusion of the overview here, is the DVDs and the DVD menus. I mentioned in the task force enlistment episode on YouTube that I strongly suggest everyone buys the DVDs. The DVDs were considered the final work. I mean, the show's been out for a number of years now. It's almost 20 years since launch, right? And the way I've treated the DVDs is as the primary investigation file or the evidence file. And it was very important to me to have what the creators considered to be the final work. It doesn't mean we're going to ignore all the additional stuff that's been released since, but as what's considered absolute canon, in my view, was the DVDs. Now, part of what I strongly suggest the Hay Place bounty hunters to do is to buy the DVDs. If the Blu-rays are the same, that's fine. I haven't seen the Blu-rays. If the Blu-rays are different, my suggestion is still to buy the DVDs. We're really wanting the least or, most unadulterated copy or unadulterated version of the evidence file that we can find. All the extra stuff is great, but we're really looking, at what the creators considered the final work. Now, one of the things the Hay Place bounty hunters will do is to scan through the menus, look at the imagery. Is there anything there, right? And the same approach will be for all the DVDs, all the DVD covers, all the DVD menus. But that is the limit of the scope, because we obviously have the Wolf Emergency Response Team, which you could say is almost a Hay Place bounty hunters style task force as well, but they focus on everything outside of the show. Right, so their focus is not going to be the DVDs or even the show itself, really. It's all the additional, extracurricular information, like the web archives and the stuff that NBC had posted online, like Dunder Mifflin newsletters and all that sort of thing, right? So the scope is limited here, but there's still a vast amount of work here, guys, and that's why we have this particular specialized team. Often when you watch the show, you can just get, it sort of hypnotizes you a little bit. You just get comfortable, you're chilling out, you're watching jokes, but really that's not the task. In some ways, it's going to be to sort of almost temporarily ignore story arcs and plot. Temporarily, I say that very specifically because, to sort of study individual frames, you're going to have to pause the show, look at that. What is that particular thing? Right, and once we've found that particular thing, then that image should be shared with this task force, and then the discussion happens. And the discussion will revolve around story arcs, themes, motif, and all the other stuff that I've already mentioned. But the first step is really to, as I said, I imagine there's going to be a lot of pausing, guys. Pause, what is that? right? And then we discuss it in further detail. So the sort of person that I feel should really be, enlisting to this task force is people who like to get to that granular level. People who enjoy sort of a where's Waldo or where's Wally, as we say in Australia. People who enjoy finding that stuff. People who enjoy discussing the most minutest of details. Right? Do you want to be Hey King? If you have that patience and if you have that acumen, then this is the task force for you. Welcome to the Anti-Strangling Task Force.